As always, this show is great. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and once a week for the next month, I will be eagerly awaiting a new episode of Invincible. With roughly a decade of hindsight, the same writing team was able to craft this narrative, and it's all the better for it. I'm a little biased because despite parts that have aged, the comic run for Invincible might be my favorite superhero story ever, but even that perspective shows just how monumentally good this show is. Because of how closely the show follows the comic, I know just about every twist and turn that is coming, yet somehow more emotional weight is given to each and every one of those moments, crafting a story that is beyond fun to watch, but still soul-crushing at times. The action doesn't quite reach the highs of the first season's finale, but that's not for lack of animation, and that may be only because it has fewer psychological implications, though that's not to say this second season doesn't have any. Setting up Mark's dilemma with whether or not he should or even has the right to take a life is the perfect thing to be seeding right now. That's all I'll say about that, but just know the writers know what they are doing. In fact, pretty much everything that needs to be foreshadowed isn't just there, it's done phenomenally. Touched on just enough to give you promise for what's to come, but not too much so it isn't obvious where it's going. Definitely check Invincible out if you haven't, but I assume you have. It's been a few months since part 1 of season 2, but I figure I'll give you a spoiler warning, because from here on out, I'm not going to be vague. I won't spoil anything from the comic, but spoilers for everything we've seen so far. I was never worried about the multiversal elements that the Invincible narrative dives into, but I do understand not liking it or not wanting it. Angstrom Levy was someone who needed to be in this show, but I still had it in the back of my mind that he could be cut from the story, though I'm infinitely glad that he's not. And though we haven't seen her, the same goes for a character like Anissa, a character that is so ingrained into the narrative that they have to put her in. But just from how complicated she is, it's going to take some fancy writing to do it justice. But I have faith in Robert Kirkman and his team that they won't just follow the comic, they'll make it better. As always, what draws me in is the action, some of which is truly next level. And it was clear from the Adam and Eve special that the animation team was stepping up. There were always 2 teams behind the show, one team making the jaw-dropping fight scenes and another doing the dialogue, similar to an anime, but even the dialogue in this second season was improved immensely. Simple things like shading and pencil mileage were crafted with a bunch more effort, and that is clear in the show. Everything from the fight scenes to people just walking on the street looked much more fluid than before. And not only is the animation fluid, but the story is as well. Bouncing from one place to another, the show manages to make everything feel as important as the last, juggling each storyline masterfully. Everything that the people in this universe do feels natural. Every new civilization, culture, and specific person is fleshed out to the point where I don't think there's a single small part or two-dimensional character in the whole show. Even Debbie, nothing more than really a background character in the comic, has a million more things to do. She has plenty of character work much later on in the comic, but more focus is given to her in the show. And despite that being the most heart-wrenching aspect of the story, it might be the best. Even if it comes down to screen time alone, I love what they have been doing with her. And they've been doing a similar thing with Donald, featuring the same basic story from the comics but with much more focus and added drama. It's not new, it's just much more interesting. Characters like Amber, however, leave me a little more confused. No spoilers, but where are we going with her? I appreciate when relationships get messy in shows that I love, but this is something that might have been better not being in the show in the first place. But let's talk about episode 5, because that's why you really came here. Yet, before we do that, I do want to bring up the mid-season break, because did we really need that gap? This season could have been astronomical, but by putting months in the middle of it, it made it feel like 2 unfinished separate seasons, rather than the one whole product it was supposed to be. I mentioned some negatives earlier, but I think this might be the one thing that I truly don't like about the show. It would have been just as easy and better to just wait and release season 2 now, and the show would have been all the better for it. But those are my 2 cents on the break, because we did not need it. However, episode 5 brought us right back to where we left off. Skipping over some time so that Mark could heal, 2 months have gone by since the last episode ended. I mean, Mark is constantly healing from life-threatening injuries in a matter of months, but this was on an alien planet, who knows how far from Earth. Of course, Mark eventually returns home, but the important thing is that Nolan's new son is brought back with him. A lot of the episode is about dealing with the fallout of exactly what everyone is supposed to do with that kid, but I'm glad for the tension it creates between the characters, Mark, Debbie, and Cecil especially. Plus, later in the episode, we get to the Sequids, creating some more of that tension I love. A lot of this is played off for jokes, especially with the Shapesmith and his origins, but it is still given enough weight to be serious when it needs to be. And speaking of which, things get real dire towards the end of the episode. Multiple times I found myself worried about characters I had barely given a thought to before then. Like Shrinking Ray. Is she alive? I don't think so, but dang, that was insane. I can't wait for the next episode, and while I do have a clue as to where we're going, I can only imagine the cliffhanger we're going to be left off on at the end of this season. And before I wrap up, I have to ask, what is going on with Thaddeus's beard? Thaddeus? Whatever. But did he rip off his entire beard, or had he been wearing a fake one for presumably decades, probably longer? Either way, that shows pure dedication, and I love it. Also, will I review every episode when it comes out? I don't know. I have a busy schedule. Though I do love talking Invincible, so probably. Either way, I'll definitely have a review out for the second season as a whole once it wraps up, so keep an eye out for that. But until then, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.